I talk a lot on this channel about money printing by the central bank because of all the harm that it creates unnecessarily. Um, and so in this case, I want to address an argument that's made against what I argue. And that argument is that there is no correlation between money supply aggregates and um, let me just check here. Yeah, sorry, got confused for a minute. The argument is that there's no correlation between monetary aggregates, i.e. the money supply, and consumer prices. And it's very silly to me. It's almost as though they're just going out of their way to make excuses. I want to show you how it's undeniable that it is the money supply that increases consumer prices. Well, first, let me tell you, well, all right, so I'll make that as a statement. That is the causation. Um, I'm not surprised that you don't see a correlation. How exactly would you do it? I can tell you if you do it such that um, you show the correlation over 10-year periods, you'll see it. Increase in the money supply, increase in consumer prices. But it's easy to see that if you use smaller time periods, you won't necessarily see it because the government prints money today. Do prices go up today equally? Not necessarily. The timing is, you can't match the timing. That's the point. It's probably not even a set timing. So in some years and some conditions, if you increase the money supply by 5%, prices might rise 5%, I don't know, 6 months, a year after. And in other times, it might be a year and a half, 2 years after. And then more likely, it won't show up like that. It won't, the 5% won't just show up all at once in a delayed fashion. It would be spread over different time periods. Some would be spent today, more would be spent 3 months from now. It takes time for the money to filter through the economic system. And then further, you've got businesses, you've got the economy growing, which means businesses producing, creating goods and services. They're expanding the supply of goods and services, which lowers prices. We would all have lower prices year after year if you didn't have the government printing money. So you've got that effect going against the increase in the money supply. And then, as I've pointed out in other videos, a lot of the increase in the money supply doesn't go into the real economy. It goes disproportionately into the stock market and bond market and other markets. And it shows up there. It never even hits the real economy. So it's really hard to capture all of that and aggregate it and come up with a correlation. So let's just forget statistical correlations and think of it logically because it's undeniable. So think of it like this. You've got an economy where you've got $100 being spent and you've got 100 goods in the economy. So you've got demand of 100 over the supply of 100. 100 in spending over 100 in supply. What's the average price per good in that economy? $1. 100 divided by 100 equals 1. Well, what if you, let me stop there a second. I said you have $100 in spending. If you do not increase the quantity of money in that economy, how can prices rise? If you're not spending more than 100, how can the price of the average good go above $1? Especially when the supply is increasing, when the denominator of 100 is increasing, which sends the number lower. How can you have an increase in prices? You cannot. If more money is not spent, you will not get an increase in prices. Cannot happen, will not happen. But conversely, if that $100 in spending demand in the numerator doubles to 200, what's going to happen to your average price? You now have 200 in spending divided by 100 in supply, if supply has remained the same. Well, now the average price is $2. But again, the price could not have risen without the additional spending, especially if the supply had increased. Now, you could have a decrease in supply. You could have a retrogressing economy where supply goes from 100 to 50 and the spending remains the same at 100. Yeah, then you would have prices double. But in our growing economy that is growing over time, we're producing more goods and services over time all throughout the West and most of the world. You don't have supply decreasing, certainly not over a multi-year period. So just assume supply never falls. So if supply is always the same or greater, the only way prices can rise is if the spending increases, i.e., if there's more money in the economy, more money chasing the same amount of goods. So it's as simple as that. You don't need correlations. Forget correlations. Use logic. It's like saying you can't walk through a wall if the wall is there. You can't. You can't have an increase in prices if the money isn't there. So that's your proof that it is spending. It is an increase in the money supply that causes inflation. And it doesn't matter whether correlations show that out or not. Okay, thank you very much. Please like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it.